Hey, welcome back, Sergio here. This is the fourth part in the Nikon SB-910 series, and we're talking about its repeater functionality. Now, please excuse me if I'm a bit sleepy today, but that's because I'm shooting during the night. It's roughly 1 AM at the moment, or something like that, and basically daytime is just way too hot, and I need to have my air conditioning unit off, because otherwise it'll make too much noise and you couldn't be able to hear me. Now, my workstation PC behind me, which is running because it's basically recording all of this, is making some noise, but at least I can filter that out. Now, anyway, this time we're looking at on-camera repeating flash. Now, I keep mentioning that there will be a separate video that covers all the off-camera stuff, and that's the next video coming up in the series after this one, and also that'll be the last video in the series, so just saying. We already covered the manual and GN modes, as well as manual flash theory, overall specs and batteries in the first video, TTL and TTL-BL in the second video, and non-TTL auto flash in the third video, and tested everything out. Now, have a look at those if you haven't already, because they cover each function in detail. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the intro. So let's have a look at the specs. The specs read as follows. The Nikon SB-910 is part of Nikon's Creative Lighting System, or CLS, and Nikon wanted it to offer all the functions that one would need to help them be as creative as they can. Or so they said anyway. That included the repeating flash, or repeater mode, also known as stroboscopic flash. The stroboscopic flash is simply a manually set flash output value that fires more than once during a single exposure. That's it. This mode is meant to allow the user, especially film users, to capture more than one exposure into one. The way it works is that you dial in a manual power value, so that the manual flash theory from video 1 applies here, and then you dial in how many times you want the speedlight to fire and how many times a second in hertz. Since everything is in hertz, everything happens per second. A 10 hertz setting, for example, then divides the second into 10 equal subdivisions at which the flash will fire. That means that you can fire a maximum number of 10 flashes during 1 second. You may choose between 1 and 100 hertz. The total number of times the flash can fire is limited by the speedlight's ability to maintain strobing. It may sound like it's really simple, and it definitely is simpler to use and understand than all the other modes, but there are still things to keep in mind. You still need to work out your output value based on the distance between your speedlight and your subject, and the aperture and ISO you're working with. Once you did that, you need to keep in mind that a single firing is enough to expose the subject correctly. So if your subject is moving across the frame, this is fine, but any point across the frame that is not moving will be lit by multiple flashes rather than one. So the particular area of the frame that is recording these reflections will be overexposed, including a stationary subject. The image sensor is seeing the world in 2 dimensions. Remember that doubling the power is the same as one stop of light up or down. So for example, let's say you worked out a power value of 1/128. Anything in the frame that reflects that back through the lens will be exposed correctly, but if you fire it twice, then it will be the equivalent of 1/64th, and if you fire it 4 times, it will be the equivalent of 1/32nd, and so on. Doubling the power is the same as doubling the amount of flashes you're firing, and vice versa. So it is actually rather important how you frame things, if you want to be able to maintain your aperture settings or vice versa. It is also important to make sure that the shutter is open long enough to capture all the flashes, whether it's more or less than 1 second. The only syncing function available with this mode is red eye reduction. Accessing the repeater mode is simply done by pressing the mode button and scrolling until you see the RPT symbol appearing at the top. RPT stands for repeater. There are no menu items we haven't already covered that are relevant to this mode, so we'll skip the menu this time. The screen shows your exposure parameters, which update automatically, and while facing forward, the speedlight will do the flash to subject distance math for you, exactly like manual mode. The distance indicator tells you how far the subject should be from the speedlight, and it is useful for figuring out bouncing distances just like before. The zoom function is the same here as it is in all the other modes, which we already covered. The next function button, labeled M, is your power output. Press that and dial in your output of choice manually, which is displayed at the top of the screen like in manual mode. This is a manual setting, so remember, this is how the power output is set. No other parameter will affect it, even though everything is being displayed. You may choose between 1/128th and 1/8th. The third function button, labeled times/hertz, is how you tell the Speedlight how many times to fire and how fast. Press once, and whichever setting you last used will be highlighted. Dial in your value, and then press the function button again to access the other setting, and once again dial in your value and hit OK. The test fire button will test fire your settings. There is no wrong exposure warning in this mode. Right, so that's pretty much that. Now, as it says in the specs, this mode is used to record more than one exposure into a single exposure. You already know that the Speedlight is incredibly fast and will freeze motion, which is why you can do things like these in the first place. Now, it's important to have motion so that you don't have too many areas of the frame being taken by a stationary reflection. Now, some people say that the best way to use this is against a black background. Others say that you should not limit yourself to that, but it doesn't really matter as long as you're able to create your vision. So let's have a look at how we test it out. I do have the same setup as last time with the HDMI cable and all that. So basically what you can see here is a spinning subject, and I used 4 flashes. And this is just 1 flash. So you can see the difference in the kind of effect that you can obtain while using this mode. So that's once again, that's with 4 flashes, and this is 1 flash. Next up, I have a tape recorder here, and the tapes are actually spinning, but I froze the motion with 1 flash in the first picture here, and then I froze it with 2 flashes in the next picture, and then 3 flashes. So you can see you can just kind of add on top of the vents that on top of the tape vents there. So that's quite interesting, I think. Next up, I just run my hand through the frame, so you can see my hand just kind of ghosting through, which is interesting. You can use that effect. And then here it's just I used 3 flashes, but I kind of like the blur kind of it's not exactly blur because it's basically just 3 exposures on top of each other, but it looks interesting like that, you know. So this is the kind of thing that you can do with this mode. I'm hoping that it makes some sense. It's not the most creative stuff that I've ever done, but it does illustrate what I'm trying to do here. Well, that's a cool addition to have with your Speedlight, I think. I mean, it's very easy to use as well, but there are things to consider. It makes sense to assess your scene and consider your apertures and power outputs. We already discussed how to calculate those in the first video, but remember, once you get your exposure, you have to be considerate of how many of those exposures you're actually recording. Stationary objects may be overexposed, while moving objects may be underexposed, you know, things like that basically. Remember that doubling the the number of flashes is the equivalent of doubling the power, which is a stop of light. And every 2 stops of light, double the distance between your subject and your flash. But try to look between the lines here, because that quote-unquote subject could actually be your environment. Now also think about what sort of lens you want to use for your application. Now it's the kind of shot that you need to put some thought into before you shoot, and you may need to try a few times to get it right, but it's, you know, it's fun to do. It allows you to freeze the motion that you want to freeze, and just basically it's all about having fun and being creative. I mean, you know, so expect to have a lot of fun with this mode in the real world. Now I think that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time, whatever I'm up to next time. There's gonna be, as I said before, it's gonna be a fifth video in the series, which is all about off-camera flash, which I know that you guys want to see. So yeah, I'm just gonna go have some sleep and edit this thing tomorrow. And yeah, see you later. Bye bye.